Hey, what's up guys, Aarava here and welcome back to a brand new video here today, and welcome back to my Let's Talk F1 series. So if you're unfamiliar with this series, it's where we talk about real life Formula 1, specifically right at the start of the season, usually about the brand new car launches for the year. So obviously 2019 is pretty much upon us, as today Haas have revealed their brand new livery. But not only that, because we thought it would just be a livery reveal, but it seems like they have also revealed a little bit of their 2019 challenges. So we'll be talking about those little aero bits in a little bit. But first of all, just want to get your thoughts on the livery, because of course, compared to most cars, this will probably be one of the cars that has changed the most visually speaking, because obviously Haas this year are sponsored by Rich Energy, which is a drinks company, which is apparently going to try and rival Red Bull. More into that later, but obviously it's a black and gold logo for Rich Energy, so the car is now black and gold with a bit of white. So let me know what you think about the livery in general. My personal thoughts, pretty nice, pretty slick. They could have done a lot more, I feel. It was quite a simplistic livery, actually, especially from the side angles. It's very plain, which surprised me. I thought they'd go really, full hog with the gold usage. I guess, I don't know, is gold paint more expensive or something like that to use? I don't know, but they just decided not to go with it. And then also, I feel like the peak logo right at the back is very out of place with the blue compared to the gold. But there you go. But from the front, very slick looking car. Obviously, it's still a Haas, so it has those kind of Haas tendencies of the way the colour is blocked out of the very front of the nose cone and whatnot. And then obviously on the side, big Haas logoing, but nice Rich Energy on the engine cover. But yeah, let me know in the comments below what you think about the livery. And also, let me know what you think about, well, I think this is worth discussing because it is a very odd thing. Now, Rich Energy came out of nowhere, like seemingly like, no one knew about them. I don't know about any fellow people from the UK, but you don't see the cans being sold on supermarket shelves. Apparently that's not their strategy. Apparently they do only online sales, and they do private sales to like places like casinos and whatnot, and that's why you don't see Rich Energy being sold on the public market in the UK. But still, I've never ever heard of Rich Energy. Apparently, according to those people who have tried Rich Energy, it doesn't taste any different to Red Bull, which is something that the owner has always bragged about. I can't remember the guy's name, but he's a Donny with a huge beard, and he always talked about in the build-up to this season about Rich Energy as a drink tasting better than Red Bull. And he recently had a few articles come out just before the launch, actually, this morning, about wanting to beat Red Bull off track, and if they can on track. He talked about people buying less Red Bull in their like casinos or just air events or whatnot, and all this stuff. And then also that he was like, if he could beat them on track as well, that'd be even better. I have high ambitions for the team. So it almost sounded like, and that's why some of the articles kind of quoted him saying that he thinks that Haas, Rich Energy Haas, but could beat Red Bull on track at some point. I really don't think so. I think it'd be quite a miracle if Haas could really take it to Red Bull this season. Of course, Haas is pretty much like a Ferrari little B team. Obviously, they use the Ferrari engine. They use a lot of components from Ferrari because they're a very efficient team, Haas. They play it clever. They use all the parts within rules that are allowed to with sharing from Ferrari. So they use all the stuff from Ferrari they can get away with, and then the rest of the stuff they have to build themselves, they do build themselves. So I doubt Ferrari would ever even allow them to get really, that high up the order. But yeah, very weird, boastful, wishful thinking from the man behind Rich Energy. It seemed like the Haas drivers and Goodestein are a bit more down to earth in that kind of sense, but it is very odd. And I feel like a lot of you guys, a lot of F1 fans are still very skeptical about Rich Energy. So I don't know. It just came out of nowhere, and it's a bit odd. But there you go. But let's talk about now the aerodynamic changes to the Haas. So obviously it's a livery reveal, and the real life car they had the livery on in London when they did a reveal event was a 2018 car, pretty much with just a simplified 2019 wing. But the 3D renders they released online look a bit more like a 2019 Challenger. Like, they've got a lot of features that would be a 2019 feature car. So I think they have actually, just like last year, in the digital renders, teased some of their real-life car in 2019 in the digital render. And then when it comes to the testing, they're going to launch the car for full. So I don't know, maybe it's worth for me to make a video once testing comes around to back up what we're seeing here in the 3D kind of render. But there are a few 2019 features to talk about, so let's go through them. Right, so we're going through the 3D renders, and what we've done is, because the lighting was quite dark, we boosted the kind of the whites of the image to try and bring out the kind of form a little bit more, and then we've gone in, or I've gone in rather, and kind of highlighted everything in kind of yellow. So we start off with the barge board and kind of side pod area, the side pod end plates, I guess you could say, on the side. So similar to 2018, but you can tell this is perhaps a bit of a 2019 inkling because of the way, well, last year, these 3 streaks, which is kind of almost like a Ferrari copy. You know, when the Haas came out last year, we all said it was a bit of a Ferrari B-Tech car in a way, because they did copy a lot of the aerodynamic kind of shapings of the Ferrari car. The side pod inlet is the same, it appears, as last year's car, that Ferrari style from 2017. Has to retain that. But the side pod end plate here, they've had to lower it and kind of cut it off a little bit here at the height, because there is a rule this year in Formula 1 now that there's a 3D box space around here which you can't have any aerodynamic appendages, and so that was in kind of jest of trying to open up space, I guess, for advertising and sponsors here, and also try and just cut the shape a little bit and extending the bargeboard area a little bit longer to try and help flow keep attached from the front wing to this side area. So in doing so, in keeping with that ruling, to have these same 3 streaks, they've had to lower the entire thing. So you can bet that a lot of teams are probably going to be doing this year about lowering where their side pod end plates are, but still trying to keep that same philosophy of having this entire wall of aero and kind of, you know, flow control device based on the side of the side pod, trying to pull the air to the rear of the car. So they've lowered that, but it is essentially looking like the same thing they had last year. If that changes for when they actually launch the car, that remains to be seen. So that's what I'm saying. Take this all with a big asterisk, because a lot of this might change when they actually launch the full car, but this definitely is a different kind of looking thing to what we had at the end of last year. The same thing with the actual mirror itself. It looks like they have a 2-pronged attachment point here for the mirror. They've got a kind of normal upright on the side of the actual chassis itself, but then they've got a longer streak that kind of connects on. So a lot like a lot of the top teams were doing last year, they're trying to be a little bit clever about the way they attach the mirrors and doing it in a way where they try and gain some aerodynamic advantage, because the air will get affected by this little pylon coming across, because you can't really see it from this angle. You will do in the next kind of few shots. This actually comes across the top of the side pod area, so it will be able to try and manipulate the air a little bit and maybe try and encourage some mixing on the very top of the side pod, and that mixing will try and keep the airflow attached a little bit as it goes on the top of the side pod area. So that is a little bit different. These kind of areas all a little bit similar to last year, and these probably a bit more of a kind of pinch of salt. These could definitely very much change in the 2019 testing once they get to it. If we move on to the front of the car, just highlighting the simplistic front wing, that is something that probably is part of the 2019 design. Obviously, every single car now pretty much has a spec design for the 2019 wing. There are going to be a few variations, but pretty much the end plate has to be very much plain on these new 2019 cars, and also the number of flaps that are allowed and the simplicity of it is very much governed now by the FI technical regulations, so that'll be very, very similar. Also, again, what has been outlawed for 2019 for every single team is the blown wheel nut solution, so they've blocked off that blown wheel nut. So in the past, you might have seen this crevice open to allow air to come through, but I've seen a few analysts on Twitter say that it looks like maybe they've got a bit of an opening in the actual wheel hub rim itself to allow some air through, to maybe try something clever there. So that might be another route other teams all to go with, trying to let air somehow go through the wheel rims themselves rather than the actual wheel nut itself. Obviously, that'll take a little bit more processing to actually work out, especially because now the brake ducts themselves, remember, have to be simplicity. You can't have complicated brake ducts anymore this year. That's another thing the FI have outlawed. It has to be a simplistic design. So again, that's going to be tough to actually manufacture in terms of trying to do that, essentially. And then we move to the rear end of the car, the rear wing. Now, this is, again, a 2019 feature, which was in the real launch car in London, they had a 2018 rear wing, but then it was very odd because in the 3D render, this is very much a 2019 wing because they've got no more slit gaps at the very top of the rear wing. That's something else that was outlawed, innovation that was done a few years ago, started by Toro Rosso, I believe it was, and then every team adapted it, of these slot gaps in the end plate of the rear wing on the top here, trying to bleed air from one side of the rear wing to the other, trying to bleed pressure, essentially, kind of alleviate some of that pressure to help the rear wing work a little bit more efficiently. So that's been outlawed, so that's all nice and smooth now. It does allow for, I guess, the sponsorships once again to be a bit more prominent there with the peak logo on the Haas. But what they have got now, a new development on the Haas, is a copycat pretty much of the McLaren style strakes and the kind of 3D nature of the rear wing. So you'll see it better from a different angle once you get to it. But essentially, like the McLaren car, you've got these streaks and slot gaps that dangle off the side of the rear wing. So the rear wings anyway undulate inwards on themselves and go to the inside of the car, but then they've got these streaks that continue going straight out into the open air, and so that will try and cut drag, but at the same time still try and bleed air down towards that rear end of the car, which is going to try and help the diffuser work a bit more efficiently, and that entire rear end try and suck it down to the edge in tandem with the streaks that are already there at the very bottom of the rear wing. So very much a 2019 design of the rear wing here on the 3D render. So that's why I say it's a very odd launch for the Haas. I feel like Williams might do the same thing, because Williams apparently are only doing a livery launch on the 11th on Monday. But again, I feel like Williams might do a Haas here and have a few little inklings of their 2019 design in the 3D renders, if they don't do it on like a real life car or whatnot. So a bit of a weird way for Haas to launch it, but there you go. So we move on to the rear end of the car. So again, now you can see what I mean by the McLaren style protruding arms basically on the rear wing. There you can see the rest of the rear wing is cutting in, but you've got these dangling bits still allowing air to bleed through, and also air coming through is going to go through these slots, and so there's kind of no extra drag hopefully being added, or not too much extra drag being added, as it cuts the drag at the same time as the air can go through the slot gaps. Then there, from this angle, if you look closer, I zoom in a little bit actually, you can see the mirror and what I'm talking about. You've got this upright coming in, but that is the side portion that attaches to the mirror, so you can clearly see that is basically going to be another way they can try and manipulate the air on the very top of this area of the side pod, along with the usual armatures on the end plate, on the end plate side pod bit. They'll try and affect the air on the top there. So a little clever detailing like the top teams kind of did last year. Obviously, they've kind of outlawed the fancier kind of stuff that Ferrari tried on the Halo itself, but you're still allowed to do, within some limits, some interesting things on the actual armature itself if it connects back to the chassis. And then with the exhaust here, they've got the kind of the wastegate. So I think a bit of a difference to what they had last year, and kind of copying through a few of the other teams at the top. You know, a few different solutions. I think it was Mercedes that had a bit of a Mickey Mouse solution, and I think Ferrari adopted this same one where it was right at the top. They've also got a bit more of an aggressive rear suspension, but you can see that on a different angle a bit better. But it's a very aggressive suspension, almost a little bit like the McLaren suspension that they had last year, where they tried a very aggressive shape to try and have a bit more of an aerodynamically positive rear suspension, basically. But before we get to that, let's just look through the side angle once again. Bit of a better angle now. You can again see the side pod arrangement there and the kind of cutaway they had to do. It's quite obvious actually from this angle in terms of they literally just lowered this part of the car then. This is all up for debate because this will definitely change into testing here, so not much point really talking too much about that. Here they've got a bit of this cooling slot. Many teams have done that. Williams was one of the first ones to actually do this kind of cooling slot, and then Mercedes copied it. So always in Formula 1, it's not always the top teams that are doing the innovation. Sometimes the bottom teams can have some good ideas that top teams kind of copy eventually there. So a cooling slot just behind the kind of halo attachment then, and then again from this angle you can see a little bit better with the lighting. It was very awkward lighting, obviously a black car, black kind of, you know, background and lighting, and then kind of white light, hard to really see. It's pretty much invisible on this side of the rear wing, but you can see it here. You got like I think that's nearly about 10 streaks there, so really going quite aggressive on the dagger kind of style on the rear wing. From the front view, you can once again see the mirror arrangement a little bit better now on this angle, and here is a confirmation of an S-duct now on the Haas. So the Haas has not had an S-duct before, I don't believe, on their car. So again, the 3D render does give us some secrets of the 2019 Challenger. So an S-duct there. I can't actually pick out where the entrance of this S-duct would be, because these are so damn dark, basically, even though I brighten up the picture already. Definitely is anywhere near the actual nose cone itself, but I assume just like Red Bull, Mercedes, Ferrari, McLaren, at some point the duct would be somewhere around here, I would guess, or maybe even just here, and that will allow obviously the air to pass through an S-shaped kind of duct to the top end there. If you don't know what that does, it injects air, essentially, and injects air from the bottom to the top here of the chassis. That injection of air encourages mixing on the top of the chassis, and that mixing is trying to smooth out the air and try and keep it attached on the top of the chassis. And that's very important, especially in this new era with the Halo being such a big blunt object at the very top of the chassis. Having the air as attached as it can be is very important there. So the Haas now with an S-duct just above the Rich Energy logo there, so another kind of inkling, like I said, from the 3D render. And then finally, here is that aggressive suspension there. You can see the way it kind of breaks up into two fingers itself, and so a little bit like the McLaren, but not totally. The McLaren was a bit of a different shape, but again, an aggressive way of going about the rear suspension there. They've got it right to the top there of the actual wheel hub kind of arrangement, and the kind of rest of the aerodynamic parts on the very end of that rear of the rear tire. So aggressive, trying to get as much aero efficiency in that area of the car. Obviously, that kind of entire area feeding in from the side pod, very important for the diffuser. Trying to get this kind of gap in between the rear tire and the rear wing as vacuum sealed as possible, trying to make the diffuser work as efficiently as possible then. But then pretty much everything else on the car is very, much from last year's car, or, an evolution of last year's car, so not too much really needless to talk about, honestly. And obviously, like I said, a lot of this is asterisks. It could very much change quite drastically when they actually launch the car properly. But yeah, Haas with a bit of a sneaky launch, in terms of like livery launch, but then they gave a few details away in the 3D render. So a little bit of a weird one really there. But guys, if you did enjoy the video and found it informative and interesting, then let me know in the comments below, and be sure to smash that like button. If you are new around here, do get subscribed for weekly Formula 1 content. Mainly I do Formula 1 gaming on this channel, but at this time of the year, for the next month or so, I'm doing a lot of aerodynamic videos trying to analyze the car. Obviously, it's not going to be the same level as the employed analysts on your TV or whatnot, but I try my best. I'm an aerospace engineering graduate, so I know a little bit about all of it, so I can give you a bit more of a simplistic view, I guess, a bit more of an understandable view, maybe, compared to some of the more technical kind of lookings as you might find on articles or whatever on TV or whatnot. So hopefully it is somewhat helpful to those of you who are maybe not completely familiar with Formula 1 and aren't really clued in the intricacies of these cars in an in-depth way. But yeah, I mean, always love doing these at this time of the year. It kind of allows me to be a bit more nerdy on the channel, if you will. So do get subscribed for all those videos. I'll be trying to analyze every single car, so that'll be pretty good. So starting from next week, obviously, Toro Rosso, and then pretty much the entire of next week is going to be like Christmas for the F1 car launches. But guys, I've been aarava. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. I will see you guys next time. Goodbye.